Welcome to the Don't Die Rusty podcast. I'm Rick Hanson, and we will be talking about living, not dying. We're all in this adventure together, and we will be interviewing people who inspire us to live our best lives. People with various backgrounds who will walk us down the trails they took to not die rusty. Adventure in life are many things to many people. It could be a sprint or an endurance race, but with each adventure, we become a better version of us. We hope you keep chasing those dreams, being the best you, and of course, don't die rusty. Well, hello, Don't Die Rusty Nation. Tonight I have a guest, Tonja Waring, and I have to tell you that she is the first person that I have interviewed or had a conversation with from my hometown, Riverside, South Dakota. That is amazing.
That's awesome. I know we've known each other a long time, right?
Well, we have known each other a long time, and it's funny that I reached out to you and on social media, and we started talking a little bit, and then I had to remind you of a few things in high school that was kind of funny.
That was funny. I totally forgot about that.
Well, for the audience here, when I was a freshman, well, I was an eighth grader going to become a freshman, and in those days there was like an initiation, and last day of school, you're trying to scare the new freshmen, and people are just running around town because it's the end of the year, and Tonja here and Janet Ryman drove me. I was sitting in the middle of them, and I'm an eighth grader, and they're a junior and a senior, and I feel like I'm something because I'm riding around with two high school girls already.
You were something, Rick. You were something, and you are something. And yeah,
well,
we
thank
had
you.
all of 200 kids in the whole high school, right? Janet was probably heading off
Right.
to college, and here you were, eighth grade, going into freshman year, and we took pity on you. Didn't want you to get initiated by those meanies.
Well, I know you certainly helped me out there, and I certainly appreciate it. But it was like, it's one of those things I'll never ever forget because it was like, it's kind of like life.
Yeah.
I've been places where I don't know how I end up in the middle of where I am, but I ended up there, and it all ended up good.
Yeah. Well, so after you and I talked, I called Janet. I said, "Do you remember that?" And she goes, "No, I don't really remember that, but no wonder Rick likes me so much."
That's right. No, I don't know. It's one of those memories you will never forget, and and it's cool because, like I said, you're the first person from Ree Heights that I've had a conversation with, and it's amazing how when you leave a little town and you go different directions, but you still have those roots.
Yes. Yes. And, I was someone I never wanted to leave Rehide, South Dakota. I envisioned that I would marry a rancher, have children, do some farming stuff, have a garden, take care of my kids, maybe do a couple cattle drives. And my life just went a completely different direction. And my kids will laugh because if someone asks me something about myself, I always start with I grew up on a cattle ranch in Riverside, South Dakota. I went to a 2-room country school. I rode my horse to school some days. And, going to Ree Heights was big town because I grew up 15 miles from Ree Heights. And I got to go into town and play softball and go to Iverson's Tavern and get a soda pop and go, maybe over to the grocery store. And that was the city for me. I don't know what it was for you, but that was the city for me. And I remember you from the time we were little kids.
Well, it was, and it was fun because the thing about Ree Heights too. You'd mentioned softball, which is funny because it didn't matter what age you were, boy or girl, as long as you had to have everybody play, or you didn't get to.
Yeah. Everybody had to show up, right? To make a
Yeah.
team. And one of the things I love about how we grew up, Rick, is there was such an opportunity to participate. The same size basketball team got filled with 50 kids from a class as 500 kids in some of those bigger towns. And we had a lot of opportunities in grade school that people didn't get till maybe they were juniors and seniors in high school.
Yes, and that is the cool thing about growing up in a little town or in a little area is that. And also, it was funny. It's before cell phones, of course, and even with cell phones these days and landlines those days, mom and dad would have still found out quicker that you did something wrong in town because everybody kind of. It's funny how they say it takes a village, but I'm just talking about Rehites, maybe even Miller. People would have said, "Do you know what those kids were doing?" If
Yeah.
you were causing trouble, and it's interesting these days, like, and it was just so fun. Like I I I look back at times I don't Bob DeGeest and all the other people. We just had fun
Yep.
enjoying. They mom and dad would play. I mean, my dad would play volleyball. We'd go play outside. We'd go do something or whatever. It was just one of
Yep.
those fun times. Or going, you know, Highmore to Old Settlers Day or whatever you did. Everybody. It was just fun that we got to do that stuff. But you're right. It's funny because I was talking to somebody. Oh, it might have been a couple months ago, and I said when we went to Huron to the fair, going to McDonald's was a big thing. That was eating out.
Yep. Yep. That was a big deal. Well, I have what you're talking about reminds me of it takes a village to raise a child. And everybody in that town had permission to reprimand a kid if they were doing the wrong thing, and nobody thought anything about it. And if someone else didn't, someone else was going to. I have a story. I was in Dallas, Texas, and I'm eating at a Vietnamese restaurant. And I'm hearing this guy talking about all these different places that sound familiar, like South Dakota. And I couldn't help myself. I'm like, hey, are you from South Dakota? He goes, no, I'm from Minnesota. And I thought, okay, well, he just shut down the conversation. No big deal. Didn't really bother me. I just thought, okay, well, he wasn't that friendly. And then I get ready to leave, and he goes, hey, he goes, I have family that comes from South Dakota, from a small town. You've never heard of it. And I said, really? What's the town? And he goes, Rehites, South Dakota. And I said, oh my gosh, we're probably related. And the person I was with just about fell off their chair because he knew how small Rehites, South Dakota was. And if he hadn't been there, he wouldn't have believed that this guy and I were talking about all the different families that we knew and everything else. And the whole story about the six points of separation, uh, that's alive and well in South Dakota. South Dakota is a small state. And typically, if someone is from the state, it doesn't take long until you have someone in common that you know. And that you just don't find with other people, and how we got to grow up, and what a true blessing that was for anybody who grew up in that area.
Definitely because I, traveling or going anywhere, when I say Rehight, South Dakota, it is amazing how many people know someone from Rehight, South Dakota, which us growing up, we would have never thought of that, but it just keeps on like it's a big, I guess it's a big circle that you never realize that stuff. And do you know this person or do you know that person? Yeah, I do, or it's so fun. And I've been places and I know this person and well, that's very, very cool. And you can be, like you said, all over. Here's another funny one is I lived in Australia for a year, and I was over there, and of course I met some rodeoers, which was fun. And in all of the places in Western Australia, I go to this rodeo and I meet these people, and of all the places they could have rodeoed in America, they rodeoed in South Dakota.
Wow. Yep.
And and then it's funny how it started connecting people and how it goes,
Yeah.
and they were bronc riders, so of course they knew the Epbauers, and at that, it's just funny how life goes, and you can go like I'm on the halfway around the world, and they rode in the South Dakota, they rode in SDRA, but and then they were trying to get a pro card at one what they were going to, but that's besides the point. But it's just funny how life goes and how that happens.
Well, I was going to say, I think we really need to give the Bowers a big round of applause because they really put Rehites on the map. Those three brothers, bronc riders, world champions, the 10 years that they just led the PRCA and bronc riding and who they are as people. I don't know how well you know the Bowers, but they are just an incredible family. And number one, a lot of times if I say I'm from Marie Heights, people know it because of Billy, Robert, and Danny Bauer.
Definitely, Danny was a year older than me, and when then they moved to Moorcroft, and Billy was a senior when I was a. He would have been. He graduated with you, didn't he?
Now Billy and Wanda graduated a year before Janet.
Yeah.
Danny was in my class.
Yep.
So
So well,
Danny and
you would
I
have
were in eighth grade together. See, they went to the other country school. They went to
been.
Como Country School. I went with
Yeah.
their cousins to Cedar Country School.
Yeah.
And then in eighth grade, Danny and I went to eighth grade together. And then before we started high school is when they moved to Moorcroft. But Billy stuck
Yep.
around and they always claimed they were from Rehides, South Dakota.
And I love that. I mean, and it makes Rehites proud too, and that's very cool. And it's funny that you say like Cedar and Como, because I went to school, of course, in Rehites, and it when you tell people like I had third, fourth, and fifth grade all in one class, one room, you know, they go, it's just amazing how people don't realize they didn't grow up that way, and I honestly think that it helped me, or for sure it helped me, because as a second grader you're listening to all the classes,
Mhm.
around you, or a third grader you're listening to all the classes around you, and then you keep learning as you go, so it's for me, and it would have been the same down there too, because everybody's in the one room.
Yep. Well, we had two rooms. So
Yeah.
we had kindergarten through fourth grade, I think, was in one room, and then fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth in another room. And it was great. I mean, I just had so much fun out there. And I think it just makes you a really good person because you can't get away with anything. Nobody's hiding. You're all there. You're all participating. Not one person better than the other. I mean, we were all just raised the same way, very similar values. And none of us had that much. So we weren't competing. We weren't competing with each other. We were just there to have a good time. And I have a saying about life, and that is I'm just here for the rodeo. Stuff is going to happen. I'm just observing. I'm just here for the rodeo. You might think you're at the circus, but I'm here at the rodeo.
Well,
Anyway.
I like hearing that's a good saying. I like that one because for me sometimes I get bucked off, but I do get back on again.
Yeah. Well, I think anybody who's been successful has experienced failure, even if they don't see it that way. There's a resiliency. And I really wanted to know more about why you were in Australia for a year. You told me that, and I didn't realize that, I guess, because I also spent 6 months in Australia.
Well, I was actually over there on an agriculture exchange. I came out here, I actually came to Black Hill State. I played football, and that's what I say I did. I came out here to Black Hill State I didn't know what I wanted to do for education wise, but I knew I wanted to play football. So I played football, chased girls, but I didn't catch them up, but I did know how to party at that time. I admit that stuff. But which is interesting because within the 2 years, I knew that I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I wasn't going to ever go to the NFL. And those are dreams that you have to realize in life. So I went back home. Uh, I worked for, well, it had been Ted Jennings, or at the time, I think it was, no, it was, anyway, I worked for Dale Soon, and I saved up all my money, and I got on an agriculture exchange, and I went to Australia for a year. And it's interesting because I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about myself, and I think that was the best thing for me because you grow up, because mom and dad aren't so close. They aren't a drive away. That's a long flight over to, and I lived in Western Australia. I lived in a little town called Pinjarra. So it was fun, but my first month there, we hayed, and that's all we did. We never left, and then after that, being on the exchange, because we worked so much, then I got my weekends off, and I got to go do stuff and hang out, and it was good. I met I met my ex-wife over there, and it was good. But
Yeah.
Rachel and I are still friends, and it's really cool. It was just it was not meant to be. We should have just been friends at the time, so it's good. And I got to see a lot of things, and I got to grow up, and that's one of the best things I think more kids or more humans need to learn, because I wanted to get into your traveling, but I think more humans need to do that. So, why did you? Where were you in Australia?
Well, now I'm interested to know if it was the insurance agent Jeff who talked about the Australia Agricultural Exchange. I forget his name. Is that how you learned about
No,
it?
actually, no. There was a deal in the back of like the what is it? It wasn't the tri-state. It was the green
Okay.
pages. Do you remember that? And
Yeah.
I signed up, and then I had to go to Sioux Falls to do. They interview you first, like say, do you have anything, to check you
Yeah.
out, see if you're going to be good. And it ended up. I mean, I got lucky because I happened to be with the he was the president of the Angus Association over there in
Okay.
Western Australia. And when I got there, they had, oh geez, the Royal Show. It's kind of like the State Fair. It's a big deal, the Royal
Okay.
Show. I flew in, and I had, actually, it's funny. Now coming from another small town, but you got to remember it's the Angus Association. But it was Ankeny. That's who I was working for. Is Ankeny before it became Cannon River, and then Eagle Pass now. But I mean Eagle Pass. But I walked into I flew in. I am jet lagged. I mean, I sat in the Sydney airport for 10 hours, and before on it, and then I flew to Perth, and they picked me up, and then we went right to the Royal Show, to the Angus Association deal, and I'm wearing an Ankeny Angus Ranch a coat when I walked in, and it was like I was a star. And
Yeah.
in Western Australia, you're walking in with that, and then they talk to me, and I learned how to be civilized, because I still ate like a country kid with my steaks, and it's funny how I sat there, but it was a fun night, and I learned a lot, and I found a lot of good people, and I made rules, like I didn't hang around with the Americans, because there's a bunch of egg people over there. I mean, from America, and I didn't hang out with the Americans because I went to Australia to be with the Australians. I
Yeah.
mean, And I picked Australia because I could have went to Europe or wherever else, but I picked Australia because it's English speaking, and but it was good. It was really good. So that's how I got over there. How
Cool.
did you get over there?
So I was going to sign up for an agricultural program. And then I decided Shelly Hoppen was our foreign exchange student my senior
Mm-hmm.
year. Like you, I wanted to take a gap year and thought it'd be great to go to Australia. So I spent most of my time in Adelaide on the coast. My flight over was just a huge experience. I'd never been on a plane before. Lucky me, I had all of those little hot California surfer dudes going over for a big surfing competition. It was the same year as the America's Cup when
Ooh.
Australia had the America's Cup over in Perth.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a pretty
Mm-hmm.
big deal. And yeah, it was just a really eye opening experience. Unlike you, who got married over there, I was afraid to meet anybody. Um, I met a really cute guy who wanted me to extend my visa, and I just wasn't willing to risk a relationship. I wanted to get back to family. So I stayed for 6 months. And, you know, I forgot about the eating thing. Like, one side of Australia is very rogue. All the prisoners went to Australia, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
other side is British, and they're very proper.
Mm-hmm.
And the culturally, it was just that was an interesting dichotomy for me. Kind of being rogue and proper at the same time, and I was neither one of those.
Well, I was with a very English family,
Mm,
and you had tea at 10 and you had tea at 4, and it didn't matter what you were doing.
yep.
You stopped everything for tea at 10 and 4. And it was interesting because in Western Australia, when you went down to like different towns had different ethnicities that were like the Italians were in other towns, and I mean, it was just it was they were predominantly Italian or wherever else, and then that was interesting to see. But my family was tea at 10 and 4, and it was fun. It was good, and like I said, then I met a lot of cool people, and I didn't and and this is going to be funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting because coming from where we came from, we accepted everybody for who they were.
Hmm.
Rehites, it's funny how people in other places think about stuff, but the first place I ever saw anybody, first time I ever saw racism, we'll say, was in Australia.
Yes.
And we were walking we were in this little pub and an Aboriginal walked through and they said, get on your side of the bar. And it was like, or the pub, we didn't know. I was with a group of, they were from Norway and Denmark, and we were in there just having a good time. And we just walked out because nobody ever, I've never been around that. I've never seen such a thing,
Yeah.
which was interesting to me. It's changed now, but I mean, at the time, it was just like new because we just accepted everybody for who they were. That's just the way it is.
There was a lot to learn culturally in going to a different area and throughout my life with my travel and just different things that I've experienced. I always said we had four religions and Rehites primarily. It was Catholic, Methodist, Lutheran, and Presbyterian. There were some other things, but I didn't even realize other philosophies existed. And racism, like you say, there was a big Greek population where I lived, and a lot of racism towards Greeks. But in South Dakota, we have our own racism towards Native Americans. I think sometimes we just don't see it because of the water we swim in. But travel and these experiences, the thing that I appreciated about where we grew up is I, like you, didn't have racist tendencies or judgments or those kinds of things that I think some people are naturally born into we got to kind of gloss over that in our very homogenous Rehide, South Dakota, Miller, South Dakota, Highmore. Um,
Yeah.
we just didn't have those experiences.
No, and and then after I got back, I played a lot of softball, and I played a lot of softballs on the reservation, and I mean, so it's just the way it is, I mean, just what that's. But it was interesting, but I learned a lot, and I learned, when I flew in, it's interesting, and I think it's all over the world. It doesn't matter; it could be America or Australia or wherever. But when I flew in, I'm sitting in Sydney before I went, and I'm sitting in, waiting on my layover, and I'm talking to people, and I knew more about Australia than they did. And you were in Adelaide, and I was in Adelaide for a little bit. And Sid Kidman, the largest landowner in Australia, came from Adelaide, and and was telling them, some Australians, the story, and they said, I didn't even know that, which was interesting to me. But there's a lot of cool history in Australia, and I learned a lot there. But the thing that got me, still, it would get me wherever I go. But growing up in South Dakota, when I was in, like I said, on the layover, you're watching the news, and this guy in Brisbane got ate by a shark. And I said, water isn't the ocean. I don't think I need to go over my knees, kind of thing.
Oh, man. I love the ocean. Seeing the ocean for the first time when I was 21 years old was just absolute amazing. Maybe I wasn't even 21. Maybe I was more like 20, but I was like a kid in a candy shop, and I still am. I just absolutely love the water. And I think on the, towards the end, they had sharks kind of in the bay or on the, I don't know where I was in the water, because I saw one and I'm like, oh, I was on a windsurfer, and my knees started shaking so badly that I fell into the water. Right?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, because that's just our relationship to sharks, and but life is meant to be experienced, and I love your tagline, "Don't die rusty," and your purpose really is to show people to get out there and live life and do things that, if your heart is calling you to do it, go for it. Most of the fear that I've overcome in my life is simply by doing that thing that I'm afraid to do or worried about, and realizing that it's not that big of a deal.
No, and that's why there was the time that a couple years ago, I really got interested, and because I always had this calling to do a podcast, and I started out with Project Rick, and because I wanted to, as after my mom died, I wanted to, it kind of gave me a reality, that you don't live forever, and
Mm.
I wanted to show like how people grow into their life. And then Don't Die Rusty came in, and I said, no, it's not Project Rick, it's Don't Die Rusty. And then my buddy Ricky Bruley helped me get this rolling, and it has taken off. And you know, I you don't know how you affect people, but it hit me. I mean, that's our similarities are both our moms have passed away, and it affected me to the point where I really I just I probably drove myself crazy because I wanted to live so much. You just don't realize until it happens. Like I am stopping myself from doing something, so I pulled the trigger, and wear out, don't rust out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to realize that some people, are perfectly content staying where they are. Like my mom was so content being at home, watching Perry Mason for the 45th time, the same episode, and Cool Hand Luke. And when I say she was really content, she was really content. I would ask her to go do things. No, she didn't really want to. And I was there when she passed away. And her only thing when she told me that it wasn't her time to go was because she wanted to ride a horse, right? And she grew up
Yeah.
riding horses,
Yeah.
and then she just had this picture like, wouldn't it be cool to ride out to the sunset together? I want to do
Yeah.
that with Chloe. Well, it'd be really cool if we could have our whole family there. But there wasn't, huge regrets for her. Myself, after I got over the fact that I wasn't going to marry a rancher and I wasn't going to be, on the ranch, I ended up going to Seattle, Minneapolis, lived in Texas. The last 2 years, I've traveled to 15 countries. I've done things I never, ever imagined would happen for me. But those were all a calling. Those were something that it was like, hey, that spiritual nudge, try this, do this. What about this? And I happen to believe in big goals. And it's not important. This is from Jim Rohn. He's a philosopher. It's not important that we set big goals, not so that we achieve them, but to become the person it takes to achieve them. And if you're someone who has this desire, but you sit there going, yeah, but I can't because of the money. I can't because of this. I can't because of that. Just change that but to an and. I want to receive $100,000 a year, but I'm a single mom of 3 kids. I want to receive $100,000 a year, and I'm a single mom of 3 kids. Your brain does something different when you switch your buts to ands. And I call that getting rid of your big butt.
Well, I have to tell you, I'll tell the audience here, you and I had talked because you wanted to kind of know what we might talk about earlier, and then we talked about a few other things, and I changed those things of I think and the but and hope, it's no, I will and I can, and this will happen. And you've changed that. And today, because of you, I had a conversation with one of my coworkers, and I said, here's the deal. You have the talent to do these things, but you got to stop saying, I think I'm better at doing your job. You are better. And you affected me in that way. And so then it keeps on going down the rail, and I I truly believe that myself.
Yeah. Well, we have 30 trillion cells listening to us, right? Listening to how we speak. And how we speak is a big deal. And how we talk to ourselves, the words that we choose. And another thing is, I really believe that when God plants a desire in our heart, like you have a desire to make a difference for people, you heard something that said, don't die rusty, right? And you have that desire. And whatever challenges we're born into, look, we don't come to this world on an even playing field. Some of us have health issues. Some of us have financial issues. Some of us have racial issues. Some of us, we're just born in different ways for our sole purpose. But who we are, God plants everything within us to achieve that goal, that burning desire that we have. And that burning desire that you have, Rick, is as unique as your thumbprint. It's different than the burning desire I have. You might go after your burning desire with a whole bunch of people saying, that's crazy. Why would you want to do that? Right? Why would you, who
Yeah.
wants to do that? Right? But that's your unique desire. That's why you keep your unique desire to yourself and you work with God to make that happen. Just knowing confidently 100% you have everything within you to achieve that goal for yourself, to live that dream for yourself. It doesn't matter if you impact one person, 5 people, 500 people, 5,000 people. What matters is that you're living authentically to who you are. And that is one of the difficult things about being raised in Riverside, South Dakota. There's kind of a cookie cutter and a standard, and you follow the cookie cutter, because if you don't follow the cookie cutter, you got your mom, your brother, your sister, your aunts, your uncles, the neighbor, they're all watching. So sometimes it's even a little harder to break out of them.
And you are very right there. And I think you know, I think that's why I kind of live in Spearfish because I live in my own little world, and because I always thought the good thing. Here's the other thing about growing up in Riverside, South Dakota is, and it's a different in this today and age, but there was only three channels if you were lucky on TV. I mean, and one of them was PBS. So what I'm saying is, mom and dad, and then you watch what mom and dad watched. That the kids. Only time maybe I got to watch what I wanted to watch was on Saturday mornings,
Yeah.
with the cartoons, and that was the only time there was cartoons on when you were a kid. But the good thing about that is I read a lot of books because I
Yes.
would go to my room and read books, and that got my imagination going, and then that got me wanting to do other things in life, and I feel lucky in that aspect and wanting to ask questions. And I think that's the big for me. If anybody would say who I am, I want to know about you. I want to know. This is why I love the concept of the podcast, is because I want to learn about people, but I also want to get things out so people start thinking about things too. And I think I look at it as growing up and reading a lot of books, and I still, as you see, I read a
Yeah.
lot of books.
Yeah. So what's your favorite?
Well, that's a funny question because I I just posted, well, actually the last episode I said there's five. I read a deal that there's five books and five movies that have affected your life. What are they? But my favorite book right now, and it will not, it hasn't left yet, is the Book of Joy by Desmond Tutu and
Oh,
Dalai
yeah.
Lama, because I think that has affected my life more than any book that I've ever read, because I like the going back and forth, and I like the human touch that they had, the connection, I should say, the more the human connection. Even though they believe differently and they talk differently, I learned from both sides.
Yeah. Now, is Desmond Tutu the Episcopal bishop from South Africa who was instrumental in the
Yep, and
apartheid
he died.
movement? And then the Dalai
Yep,
Lama, Buddhist from Tibet, now
yep,
living, where is he
yep.
living?
He
Anyway,
lives in Dharamsala. He lives,
in India. Yeah.
yep, Dharamsala.
And, that movie is on Netflix and it's awesome to, think about how much conflict we have between religions or between political parties going on in the world, and to see these two grand leaders, these really incredible human beings, and to see them interact in such a joyful way. And joy really is the highest vibration, the highest resonance. I don't know if you're into the law of attraction. Law of attraction just means that like attracts like, but law of vibration, when we start looking at that, is really how can we increase our own energy in such a way that we become that kind of light in the world, like the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And then that's joy. That's doing things that bring us joy. That's smiling big. Those are acts of kindness. Those are the things that no matter where you're born or where you live or where you travel to, those are, the essence that we should strive for in being human, in my humble opinion.
Well, I agree with you there because I think too many people look at the short term and not the long term, because joy is the long term. And I try to bring joy or happiness or a smile to people every day, and I attribute it, like, I mean, I attribute it to who I am, because that you when you see me, you get Rick. I'm not. I might be a dumbass some days, or I might be, but I try to be nice to whoever. There is no, we did an episode about judgment, but and everybody judges people, but in the end, I want to be the person that gives everybody a fair shot, or most everybody, and I want to bring peace and joy and thought to this world, and it, maybe this is the way to do it.
So, Rick, I just have to say, it's not even I want to, you just are. My memory, like if even when you first reached out to me on social media, my memory of Rick Hanson is about a 6-year-old boy, 6 or 7. You were tall, right? How tall are you? How tall are
I'm
you?
6'1".
Six
I
one.
don't know.
So
Six
you,
one. I don't remember it at that time.
yeah, but I just remember this lanky kid, super tall, skinny, knobby knees, super knobby knees, red hair, and a smile that took up probably 3/4 of your face. You just radiated joy and were happy. You always had a smile. You weren't you weren't loud or getting attention, but you were just that ray of sunshine. And I think that's what you were born for. I think this is what you were born for. If I can,
Well,
compare
thank
the
you.
essence of who you were and who you are, it's just coming back to who you are, remembering who you are.
Well, thank you. I do. The only difference now is I still have the knees, but I don't have any red hair anymore. It's almost gone.
Okay, you'd give anything to have that hair back. And freckles, and kind of pale. I just have this picture, and I think you were wearing blue, like the color blue behind you. And anyway, I just want to congratulate you and say I'm really proud of you for being true to who you are and finding your way. And sometimes what we need to do is just really stand in who we are. We can lie to other people about who we are, but we should never lie to ourselves. Knowing who we are and honoring who we are is one of the most precious gifts we can give ourselves. And I really think that's what we all get to if we're blessed to live long enough, or once we get to that point, then we get to go do whatever we're going to do wherever we do it.
Well, I agree with you because I think there was well, I know there was a time span in there that I probably wasn't my authentic self, and you try to mold into what you thought people wanted you to be, but then there's a time that the mold has to break and you have to get back to who you were. And I think in the last 15, 20 years, I've learned who I should be and who I am authentically. And like I said, what you see is what you get, and that's just the way it is anymore. I don't want to lie to myself anymore and say this is who I can be. I just saying this is who I am.
Yes. And then being the strongest, best, highest version of that. Because who you were born as is more than
Definitely.
enough. More than enough. We might have had teachers tell us we should,
And
or parents or someone tell us we should be something different. And you wanted to say something. So,
no, I was just saying it's interesting you say that because I was actually working on, and it'll come out tomorrow, and I'm putting a post out, but I read something today, and we have to realize we're one of one. There is no other person like us.
yes. Yep. We are one of one.
And I just, sometimes people don't realize that you're one of one. And I got thinking about that today because I just think about things and at work and then on my walks in the morning and other things. And I was thinking, how many people don't realize that they're one of one, that they are truly and so be your authentic self, be the person and learn who you are. You might have I have different interests than my sisters, or I had different interests than my dad, and they're better at things than I am, but I know who I am.
Yes. And what a great world we live in that we can be one of one, but everything's connected too. We can't do something to someone else without doing it to ourselves. Everything in the world is connected. Everything is energy, and energy is everything.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so we've been talking about a little bit about too much about me probably, but what if you just give us a little history of you? Because people probably will come on here and say, well, Rick, you talked a lot about yourself with Tanya, and so let's hear about you.
okay. So, I graduated with a math and computer science degree, which, is pretty logical and pretty standard and accepted. And like I said, I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And one day I walked into a Barnes and Noble and I discovered this ancient Chinese secret called feng shui, which is about arranging your home in such a way that it like sends a signal out to the universe about what you want. It's a way to change your life. And I'm really good at it. I'm an expert at it. And I love it. It is just something that has been the foundation of my life. Even as a single mom, I made sure my kids' bedrooms were arranged right, that our house felt good. I always did everything I could to put great energy into myself and into our home so that they'd feel supported. And then I used it in business. And I had an opportunity to work with a small pillow company in Minnesota and really just kind of attracted this situation to myself. It was 2008. I had failed. Well, a lot of people, I don't even think I failed. I was a real estate broker at about 60 listings, and then the real estate market crashed. And with 32,000 other realtors, 32,000 of my other best friends, I say, I couldn't find a job. And I'd gone through bankruptcy, foreclosure, divorce. I was going to food shops with my kids. And I think I put out about 200 resumes and nobody was hiring. I just, it just was incredibly difficult. And one night I was looking at classified ads. Remember the newspapers? We didn't have
Yeah.
phones. We didn't have Indeed. We didn't have any of that stuff. And I'm looking at these jobs and it's like, none of them interest me. I'm just not, they didn't feel aligned with integrity for me. And so I don't know why. I just stood up off the couch and I said, look, God, I want you to bring me something that's worthy of who I am. I want to sell something that I believe in, like with my whole heart. I don't have to, I'm not bamboozling anybody. I really want something that uses my talents. And about a week later, a friend called and said this pillow company was looking for someone and they needed someone just like me. Well, that was music to my ears. And then I met Mike Lindell with My Pillow, and the rest they say is history. At first, I wasn't going to work with him. I just thought, I didn't ask for a pillow. I don't want to work in a rundown bus barn. This isn't, this isn't what I want. But I kept hearing a voice say, this is what you asked for. This is what you asked for. And I used feng shui. I use law of attraction, manifesting, affirmations, everything that I've learned to live and to follow that voice. And I became one of the top 3 infomercial hosts. I wrote one of the most profitable newspaper ads. I redid their website. It increased sales by 41%. And I mean, it was hard work. I worked for them for 3 years doing trade shows at the Minnesota State Fair, at the Iowa State Fair. I drove all over. I, for the first time, wasn't home with my kids. And yet, I just knew that I was supposed to be there. And that's how things work when we're willing to surrender to that burning desire to have something and step into maybe the fear, listen to that higher voice, receive to overflowing. How many times do we say we want something and we just kind of push it away? So I've done that. I've been a best-selling author. I've had an aquarium business. I've had a real estate company. I've just, been open to doing whatever it took because my number one priority was to be a mom and to be with my kids. And so that's kind of what I've been up to. After I became an empty nester and after my mom passed away, my dad was in a really good place. My kids were gone, and I thought, why not travel? So I walked 550 miles across Spain, something I'd wanted to do. And then I went to 15 countries the last 2 years. My last trip being an African safari. The last 2 weeks, I've been head down writing another book and just staying in the flow, seeing what life has to offer, seeing where I can make a difference.
Well, I see you making a difference. I mean, it's fun being on social media now, following stuff. But it's interesting. The Michael in the My Pillow is I'm watching the infomercial, and I said, I know that I know Tanya. So that was funny.
So many people I would
It
get. The coolest thing really was I think I was on TV as much or more than anybody else. That infomercial played a bazillion times, right? But yet I was never recognized. I was only recognized by people who knew me from Riverside, South Dakota. Brad Constantine, remember Mr. Constantine's son? You probably don't. He was like a senior when I was in eighth
yeah.
grade. And he said he heard this infomercial and went, oh my gosh, that's Tonja Waring. He walks in, he goes, oh my gosh, that's her. People recognize my voice, right? Um, I mean, it was just the wildest thing. And that's why I always say, ask and it is given. It's biblical. I asked God to bring me something that was worthy of who I am. Well, here's the funny thing. I'd been in a couple car accidents. I had whiplash. I didn't sleep well at night. My neck hurt so bad. I went to a chiropractor probably 3 times a week. And the My Pillow
Hmm.
actually fixed my neck. After a couple months, my neck started to heal. I started to feel better. So did I get a product that I believed in 100%? You bet I did. You bet I did. For $50, 60-day money back guarantee, 10-year warranty. Man, I never felt bad about twisting someone's arm to buy My Pillow because I believed in it. And if it didn't work for them, man, they could do something else. It was life changing.
Well, and that's that's the thing. You have to do things that you believe in, because if you don't believe in them, you're not being your authentic self there, like we were talking earlier.
Yes, but one of the hard lessons I've gotten to, and it was last year, I'm 59 now. So I was 58 years old. And I think there's this Pollyanna thing that happens in Riverside, South Dakota, because my experience is that people tell the truth. If they tell you they're going to do something, they do it. Why? Because everybody else is watching. Your reputation is important. That's not how the rest of the world works. That is not how the rest of the world works, unfortunately. And those have been hard lessons for me. Just learning that, yes, I have to do what I believe in, but a lot of people out there are selling a lot of stuff that is not in your best interest. It's in their best interest. And it just is. It just is, not right or wrong. I just had to shift and understand and trust my intuition a little better. But the other thing is, I'm not really interested so much in what other people are doing. I'm interested in who I'm being.
And I guess I see where you're coming from there, and what I'm hearing from you is kind of saying to Rick, that's who you are too. Like you said,
Yeah.
I've told people it's funny how you say that coming from Lehigh, South Dakota, you tell the truth, because That's what I've told everybody. I may have a lot of money, but if I'm going to tell you I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm telling you the truth that I'm going to do whatever I can to do it, and this is the way it is.
Yeah,
I have no other thing but reputation.
absolutely. And sometimes things happen. I'm supposed to be in Nepal in 2 days, speaking at a nomad conference, and it just didn't work. I was in Africa, things happened, I needed to come home. Um, that was hard for me because I do honor my word and I do my best. And sometimes there are situations, right? The other um, option is to never promise anything and not do anything so you never mess up.
Hmm.
Integrity is just that fine line.
Hmm.
It's just, challenging yourself, doing your best to do it, knowing that sometimes you fail. But the first thing to do in restoring integrity is to let that person know that you fell short. Don't hide from it. Just say, you know what? I apologize. I'm not going to make it. And I wish that my full intent was to be there. How can I best support you? Or what can I do to make this better? So now I'm doing the presentation online, right? It's 2:30 a.m. in
Yep.
the morning that I'm doing it. No problem. No problem. I'll be up. I'll be ready to go. I'll deliver the best presentation that I can. Launch and adjust, as my mentor Gary Barnes will say.
That is that's cool because we all need to learn to adjust, and we all need to learn that not everything works out in the way it goes. But if you promise something, you're going to do it, and you're still doing it. So that is awesome.
Yeah.
And
Anyway, that's
so
all I got, Rick.
so they, well, you have. My question is, so what brought you to walk across Spain?
So I am one of the most faithful people I know. Not religious. I don't go to church, but I listen to the higher voice. And I get visions. Sometimes things just hit me and I pay attention to that. And I was watching a movie called The Way. And I don't know if you know this, but going through bankruptcy, foreclosure, divorce, raising 3 kids by yourself, it takes its toll. Just shoving down hurt, pain, anguish. And something told me when I saw that movie that I needed to do the Camino. I needed to walk the Camino de Santiago. And I just put it in my back pocket. I knew that when I became an empty nester, that was what I was going to do. And I did it. That was the first trip that I took. Some people carry their backpacks. Some people, push them forward. Some people just do it kind of the way it was intended, where you just walk, you show up where you show up. Other people will rent hotels and know exactly where they're going to stay. I went by myself, pretty unprepared, 25-pound pack up over the Pyrenees. First day, totally kicked my booty. But at the end of the first day, I realized that, man, mindset is everything. Physically, I was not prepared for that, but I am one tough mutter. And I realized that there was a lot of things that I knew I could be doing that I thought I couldn't. So that was my first lesson. The second lesson really was just unraveling this 1,100-pound hairball that I had been carrying with me for a long time. I'll get choked up. But I started to climb this other hill and I thought, oh my God, not another hill like the Pyrenees, man, I just don't know if I can do this. And I heard that voice say, Tonja, your greatest challenges are behind you. And I bawled that entire day walking. And there's something really amazing that happens in hiking. It's scientific. It's just how we are designed as people. Emotions are stored in the body, but having those walking sticks just right, left, I think it's EMDR or something, your eyes going left to right. Something happened that I just released this 1,100-pound hairball that I had been carrying around. And in 36 days, I was always provided a place to stay. I had everything I needed. I met amazing people who wanted me to continue walking with them. But I knew I needed to walk alone because I knew my spiritual work, my emotional healing, my mental, I wasn't, I needed that time to just release everything that I had been holding in. So, highly recommend it. Don't worry about doing it perfectly, it'll all work out. I miss my train. I miss my train. I had 2 hours to find the train in Spain, in Madrid, on the plane, in the planes, I don't know. And I missed it. I just couldn't communicate. I just couldn't find it. And I just started bawling like a baby, like my life, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then I realized I could just buy another train ticket for $120 or $60 or $70. The things that we make such a big deal aren't that big of a deal. And learning to travel solo has been one of the greatest, gosh, educations. I just feel like I can go anywhere, do anything, look through a clear lens. I've seen cultures, I've seen mindsets, I've seen beliefs, I've seen the poorest of the poor be the happiest and the wealthiest of the wealthiest be the most unhappy. Not that we can be the wealthiest of the wealthiest, because we're in the top 1%. If you're born in the United States of America, we can be happy, we can stop complaining, we can appreciate the little things, we can lighten our load, we can start letting go of all this stuff and really start looking at experiences and what kind of difference we want to make. In Nepal, I met a young woman, 15 years old, lost her father in an earthquake when she was 15. She's 25 now, excuse me. But she's raised her brother and her sister and taken care of her mom since she was 15 with no education. She taught herself English, but not formally educated in the low caste system. It means that as a woman in Nepal, she gets paid half as much as anybody else. And then being low caste, sometimes she's not even allowed to go into a place. But being able to meet her, sit down and talk to her and mentor her and figure out what her heart's desire is, it's this: to buy goats and sheep to give to the women in her village so that they have more power to feed their families. In her village, men are typically alcoholics, highly physically, mentally, and verbally abusive, and women can't get divorced. And this young girl, that's her dream. So definitely moving forward, looking at ways that I can support her and fulfilling her dream as she moves forward. And wherever you are, whatever you're doing, it's not that heroic to sit down and talk to someone and see how you can make a difference. She stood in my hotel room before I left and said, "Tonja, you didn't just make a difference in my life. You made a difference in my brother's life, my sister's life, and my mother's life. And my brother's going to make a difference in a whole bunch of lives that he's going to impact. And my sister's going to make a difference in all the lives she's going to impact. So by you being willing to see me, because it feels like you are the first person in my entire life who sees me, it's going to have a ripple effect." And I think we need to keep that in mind. whether it's don't die rusty, whether it's do random acts of kindness, each and every one of us has that ability to make a difference for someone.
So we'll wrap this up here, but I want to thank you so much for coming on and reliving old memories. My gosh, that took me back in time. That is awesome. But the last question we have is, what's the good life to Tonja Waring?
Oh, the good life to me is family, nature, simple things. Really doing the things that my heart is called to do. I think so many of us go to money as the first reason why we don't do things. But if we could really say, if it wasn't about the money, what would I do? I think we'd have a lot better ideas and an understanding of what the good life really is and what that means to each one of us, because it's different for everybody. But for me, it's about relationships and having those I love around. A small circle of good friends is better than 300,000 followers on Instagram.
Well, you know what? That's many of my guests have said that the good life to them is a good close knit people, that close circle around them. And so that's very, very cool. And so, but I want to thank you so much for coming on and chatting for this time. And I can't wait to catch up with you here in a month, maybe. And maybe we'll do one in the Don't Die Rusty studios itself and have another conversation. But I truly appreciate connecting with you, Tonja. I appreciate you coming on the podcast, and just thank you so much.
Rick, thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for reaching out to me on social media and building this connection, a reconnection. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you. And I truly appreciate who you are in the world and that you have the courage to follow your heart and your calling. It's really good to see you. And thank you for this time.
Well, it was really good to see you too. And I truly appreciate it. So, well, Don't Die Rusty Nation, this has been a trip down memory lane. It's been talking about our hometown and my first guest from my hometown. And like I said, I truly appreciate Tonja so much. And we'll be talking to her again sometime. And so keep chasing your dreams, being the best you, and don't die rusty.
Thank you for listening to the Don't Die Rusty podcast with your hosts, Rick Hanson and Ricky Bruley. The Don't Die Rusty podcast is written and produced by Rick Hanson and Ricky Bruley. You can find us on Instagram and on Facebook at Don't Die Rusty. You can rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You might find your review read on a future episode. Got a question for the Ricks? Send us an email at don'tdierusty@gmail.com. It too could be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Don't Die Rusty podcast wherever fine podcasts are downloaded.